At 19, an Apache girl was given to a rancher with 5 children. What happened next amazed the town. At 19, Lena Whitefeather's life was at a turning point she had never imagined. Born into the Apache community in the high desert of Arizona, she had grown up surrounded by wide-open plains, the soft rustle of wind through the sagebrush, and the stories of her ancestors, passed down through generations. Her parents had been strong and loving, teaching her the skills every young woman in the tribe needed to survive: how to gather herbs, how to track animals, how to tend to the sick, and how to carry herself with pride and courage. But life had not been gentle to Lena, and by the time she was 18, both of her parents had passed away. The world that had once felt safe and familiar suddenly seemed uncertain and frightening. For months after their deaths, Lena lived with relatives, but their home was crowded and their resources were limited. It was clear to her that she needed to find a place of her own, a home where she could live, and perhaps even help others. Around this time, the elders in the community spoke to her about a possibility. Samuel Cartwright, a widowed rancher who lived on the outskirts of the nearest town, had 5 children and no mother to care for them. The children ranged in age from 4 to 12, and life on the ranch was difficult. Samuel worked long hours, and the children were often left to manage on their own. The idea was that Lena could go to live with Samuel, help raise the children, and in return she would have a home and a place to belong. It was an unusual arrangement, and the elders cautioned her to think carefully. Lena had never imagined leaving her community, her culture, or the land she had always known. She was nervous at the thought of living with strangers, of stepping into a household that already had its own routines and expectations, but she also knew that staying with relatives indefinitely was not an option. With a mixture of fear and determination, Lena agreed to consider the proposal. She spent long nights thinking about the children she might care for, the ranch she had never seen, and the man who would be her guardian and companion in the months to come. When the day finally arrived for her to leave, the entire community gathered to see her off. It was a bittersweet moment. Some elders gave her blessings, whispering prayers for her safety and success. Friends and cousins hugged her tightly, reminding her that she would always have a place in their hearts. Her own heart was heavy, but beneath the sadness was a flicker of excitement, an opportunity to make a difference, not just for herself, but for the family she was about to join. She packed her few belongings carefully: a small bundle of clothes, a handmade blanket from her mother, and a journal to record her thoughts and experiences. Each item was a reminder of who she was and where she came from. The journey to Samuel's ranch was long and difficult. The roads were dusty, the sun harsh, and the wind carried the smell of dry earth and sage. Lena rode on horseback, feeling the rhythm of the animal beneath her and trying to calm her racing heart. She thought about what she would say to Samuel, how the children would react, and whether she would be able to find a place for herself in this new life. The ranch itself was isolated, with wide fields of dry grass stretching as far as the eye could see, dotted with cattle and a few scattered trees. It was beautiful in its own rugged way, but it was also lonely, and Lena realized that her challenge was not just to help the children, but to make this place feel like home. Upon her arrival, she was met by Samuel, a tall man with weathered features and a serious expression. He welcomed her politely, but there was an air of uncertainty about him, as if he too was unsure how this new arrangement would work. The children watched from a distance, curious but cautious. Some hid behind doors while others peeked from behind furniture. Lena could feel their skepticism, but she reminded herself that trust takes time. She offered a gentle smile and introduced herself, speaking in a calm and respectful voice. "I am Lena, she said. "I have come to help you and your family." Her words were simple, but she hoped they conveyed sincerity and warmth. The first few days were quiet and tense. Lena focused on observing the routines of the household. When the children woke, what chores needed to be done, how meals were prepared, and how Samuel managed the ranch. She noticed small things: the way the youngest child clung to his father's coat, the way the older children were expected to care for the younger ones, and the quiet moments of fear or sadness that passed unspoken. Lena understood that her role was not just to assist with chores, but to help nurture a family that had grown used to surviving without a mother's care. She moved carefully, offering help without imposing, and speaking softly so that the children would not feel threatened. Evenings were the hardest. Lena would sit alone in the kitchen after the children went to bed, reflecting on the day and writing in her journal. She wrote about the fear she felt, the hopes she had, and the memories of her parents. At the same time, she made plans for how to connect with the children, how to earn their trust, and how to gradually make the ranch feel like home for all of them. She remembered the lessons from her upbringing. Patience, respect, and kindness could break down walls that fear had built. She reminded herself that even small gestures, cooking a favorite meal, sharing a story, or simply listening, could make a difference. Lena's presence began to be noticed by the community in town. Some people were skeptical, wondering whether a young Apache woman could adjust to life on a ranch, raise 5 children she had never met, and work alongside a man who had been alone for so long. Others admired her courage, seeing in her the determination to take control of her life and step into a situation that many would avoid. Lena tried not to pay attention to gossip, focusing instead on the children, the ranch, and the slow process of building a new family. One afternoon, while helping the children gather firewood, Lena noticed the oldest boy, Thomas, struggling to lift a heavy log. She stepped forward, offering a steady hand and a few words of encouragement. "We can do this together," she said. Thomas hesitated at first, but accepted her help. For the first time, he looked at her not as an outsider, but as someone who could be trusted. It was a small victory, but it filled Lena with hope. She realized that change would not happen overnight, but each moment of connection was a step toward building a real family. The children slowly began to warm to her. They asked questions about her life, her traditions, and the stories she had learned as a child. Lena shared what she could in a way that was simple and understandable, weaving lessons about nature, courage, and respect into her stories. She taught them to recognize different plants, to listen to the sounds of the wind and the birds, and to care for the animals on the ranch. Each day brought small successes and small challenges, but Lena met them all with patience and determination. Samuel watched quietly from a distance. He had been skeptical, uncertain if anyone could truly step into the role of a mother in his household. But he began to see the changes. The children were happier, more cooperative, and more confident. Lena's gentle guidance, quiet strength, and willingness to learn about the ranch and the family had begun to bridge the gap between them. He realized that Lena was not just helping the children, she was bringing life, warmth, and stability to a home that had been missing it for far too long. By the end of her first month, Lena felt a cautious optimism. She had not yet fully earned the trust of every child, but she had made a start. She had stepped into an unfamiliar world, faced uncertainty and fear, and begun to plant the seeds of a new family. As she looked out over the rolling plains at sunset, watching the children play and Samuel tending to the cattle, she felt a quiet sense of pride. She had chosen a path that was difficult and uncertain, but it was a path that could lead to love, belonging, and a place to call home. Lena knew that the journey ahead would not be easy. There would be struggles, disagreements, and moments of doubt. But she also knew that she had the courage, patience, and heart to face whatever came next. She had taken the first step into a new life, and already the seeds of trust and family were beginning to grow. The wide desert stretched endlessly before her, full of challenges and opportunities alike, and Lena felt ready to face it all. The first weeks on the ranch had been quiet, but as the days turned into a month, Lena realized that earning the trust of Samuel's children would be harder than she had imagined. Each child had grown up in a world where they had to be independent, often caring for themselves and for each other. They were cautious, suspicious, and sometimes even resentful of her presence. Lena knew that she could not force their affection or respect. She had to earn it slowly, through patience, understanding, and small acts of kindness. The oldest, Thomas, was 12, a boy with a serious expression and a protective streak over his younger siblings. He had been used to being in charge, and the idea of a stranger stepping into the role of caregiver made him wary. At first, he barely spoke to Lena, only answering questions with short, clipped sentences. Sometimes he would roll his eyes or walk away when she tried to offer help. Lena understood that Thomas's behavior was not unkindness, but a defense mechanism. She reminded herself to be patient. She would not try to force him to like her. She would simply be there, steady and reliable, until he chose to trust her. The younger children were more unpredictable. Sarah, 10, was shy and quiet, often hiding behind the furniture when strangers came near. She would watch Lena with wide eyes, unsure whether to approach or retreat. Then there was little Michael, 8, who was curious and full of energy, but also easily frustrated, and the twins, Lucy and Peter, who were only 4, were the most difficult of all. They did not yet understand the concept of a mother figure, and sometimes cried whenever Lena tried to hold or comfort them. For Lena, these moments were challenging. She had never been a mother, but she had been raised to care for others. She drew on everything her parents had taught her: gentleness, kindness, and the ability to stay calm even in difficult situations. Every morning began the same way. Lena would rise before dawn, dress quietly, and prepare breakfast for the children and Samuel. The kitchen was a small room with a wood-burning stove, and the smell of fresh bread and porridge soon filled the air. Lena made simple meals at first: eggs, porridge, bread, and occasionally fresh fruit she could find in the small garden. She hoped that sharing food would be a way to reach the children, to show them that she cared. Some mornings they would eat in silence. Other mornings a child would ask a question about her life, and she would answer simply, telling stories of the desert, her parents, and the animals she had grown up with. Chores on the ranch were hard. Lena spent her mornings helping Samuel feed the cattle, repair fences, and fetch water from the nearby well. She learned quickly, remembering that efficiency and diligence were important to the children, who were used to hard work from an early age. When she made mistakes, she did not hide them. She laughed at herself, showing the children that it was okay to be imperfect. Slowly, the children began to notice that she was not just another stranger. She was someone who was willing to work alongside them, who did not complain, and who was dependable. One afternoon, as Lena was helping Thomas gather firewood from a nearby grove, she noticed the boy struggling with a particularly heavy log. His small shoulders shook under the weight, and he paused to catch his breath, clearly frustrated. Lena stepped forward, placing a steady hand on the log to help lift it. "We can do this together," she said softly. Thomas looked at her, hesitation in his eyes, but he allowed her to guide him. They managed to move the wood back to the barn, both smiling with quiet satisfaction. That moment, though small, was significant. Thomas began to see Lena not as an intruder, but as a partner, someone he could rely on. The youngest children were more difficult to reach. The twins, Lucy and Peter, often cried when Lena approached. Lena remembered the stories her mother had told her about the importance of patience with young children. She would sit on the floor with them, singing soft songs from her childhood and offering her hand slowly, letting them approach her when they felt ready. Some days they would crawl into her lap and fall asleep, exhausted from the day's activities. Other days, they would refuse to look at her at all. Lena accepted each reaction without anger, knowing that trust could not be rushed. Evenings were a mixture of challenges and small victories. Lena would read to the children from books she brought with her, sharing stories about faraway places and adventures. Sometimes they would draw pictures together, and she would show them how to make simple crafts from materials found around the ranch. These activities were not just for entertainment. They were a way to build connection, to show the children that she cared about their happiness and development. Slowly, laughter began to return to the house, a sound that had been rare since their mother's passing. Samuel, for his part, was cautious but observant. He had seen many people come and go in his life, and he had learned not to expect too much too quickly. But even he began to notice the changes. The children were more cooperative, more willing to listen, and more confident in their daily routines. Lena's calm presence and quiet authority began to bring balance to a household that had previously been filled with tension and uncertainty. Samuel started to trust her judgment and relied on her for advice on both household matters and ranch operations. One significant moment came during a visit to town. Lena accompanied Samuel and the children to buy supplies, and she noticed the stares and whispers from townspeople. Some looked at her skeptically, questioning whether a young Apache woman could handle life on a ranch and care for 5 children. Others admired her courage, recognizing the difficulty of her task. Lena held her head high, walking with dignity and confidence, and by the end of the trip, even the most skeptical observers had begun to notice her kindness and capability. Over time, Lena began to introduce small elements of her own culture into the household. She taught the children simple Apache songs, shared stories of her ancestors, and explained how her people had survived and thrived in the desert for generations. The children were fascinated, asking questions and listening with wide eyes. Even Thomas, initially reluctant, began to show interest, asking for details about the desert, the animals, and the plants. Lena's teachings were not just lessons in culture. They were lessons in respect, resilience, and the importance of understanding the world around them. Despite these small successes, there were still setbacks. Some days the children would argue or refuse to help with chores. Lena would sometimes feel exhausted, questioning whether she was making a difference. But she remembered the words of her mother: "Patience and love can break through the hardest hearts." She persisted, knowing that change was gradual and that every small victory counted. She focused on consistency, showing up every day with a smile, a helping hand, and a gentle heart. The seasons began to change, and with them, the rhythms of life on the ranch shifted. Spring brought new challenges: planting crops, caring for young animals, and preparing for the unpredictable desert weather. Lena adapted quickly, working alongside Samuel and the children to meet each challenge. She noticed that the children were learning from her, mimicking her careful handling of animals, her attention to detail in chores, and her calm approach to problem solving. It was a slow process, but the household was gradually transforming. By the end of the first few months, Lena had made significant progress. She had not yet become a mother figure in the full sense, but she had begun to break down barriers, earning the trust and respect of each child in her own way. She had found moments of joy, laughter, and connection in a household that had been marked by uncertainty and loss. Samuel, too, began to appreciate her contributions, recognizing that she had brought not just help, but a renewed sense of hope and stability to their lives. Lena's journey was far from over. She knew that the hardest challenges were still ahead, and that earning the full trust and love of the children would take time, patience, and unwavering dedication. But she also knew that she had the courage and determination to face whatever came next. Each day was a step forward, each smile a small victory, and each moment of connection a sign that her efforts were not in vain. As she lay in bed at night, listening to the quiet hum of the ranch and the occasional sighs of sleeping children, Lena felt a sense of purpose she had never experienced before. She had entered a world that was unfamiliar, demanding, and at times overwhelming. But she had also found a place where she could make a difference, where her actions mattered, and where she could help nurture a family in need. The road ahead would be challenging, but Lena felt ready. She had already learned that love, patience, and courage could change lives, and she was determined to continue that journey, one day at a time. By the time Lena had spent several months on the Cartwright Ranch, the rhythm of life had begun to settle into a steady pattern. She had learned the daily routines of the household, the quirks of each child, and the subtle ways Samuel managed the ranch. She had also discovered that patience, persistence, and small gestures of kindness could slowly break down the walls of doubt and fear that had surrounded the children. Yet, despite her progress, there was still a distance between her and the children, a quiet tension, a lingering uncertainty that reminded her every day that trust is not something given freely. It must be earned. The turning point came one spring morning. The sun was rising over the horizon, casting long shadows across the rolling fields of the ranch. The birds were singing, and the soft breeze carried the scent of fresh earth and blooming flowers. Lena was in the kitchen preparing breakfast when she heard shouting from outside. She rushed out to find Thomas and Michael in the yard, arguing fiercely over who would take care of the newborn calf that had been born the night before. The twins were crying nearby, frightened by the noise, and Sarah stood frozen, unsure what to do. Lena's heart sank. She knew that without intervention, the argument could escalate, and the children could end up hurt or scared. Lena stepped between Thomas and Michael, raising her voice gently but firmly. "Stop. Listen to me," she said. The boys paused, surprised by the sudden authority in her tone. "We have a new life to care for, and we must work together. No fighting, no blaming. We all have a job, and we can do it if we help each other." At first, the boys hesitated, glancing at each other with stubborn expressions. But Lena did not step back. She guided them through the process, showing them how to feed the calf, keep it warm, and ensure it was safe. Slowly, the tension melted away. The boys began to cooperate, following her instructions and realizing that working together was not only more effective, but also more satisfying. The younger children who had been frightened now began to engage as well. Lena lifted the twins and carried them close, explaining in a soft voice what was happening and reassuring them that the calf was safe. Sarah, encouraged by Lena's calm guidance, stepped forward to help with small tasks, carrying water and gently brushing the calf's fur. For the first time, the children experienced a sense of teamwork, a realization that Lena was not just there to give orders, but to guide, support, and protect them. By the end of the morning, the calf was safe and fed, the children were smiling, and even Thomas and Michael were joking with each other, a rare moment of harmony on the ranch. This event marked a subtle but profound shift in the household. The children began to see Lena not as a stranger or intruder, but as someone who genuinely cared about them and their well-being. They noticed how she patiently explained tasks, listened to their questions, and never gave up even when they resisted or complained. Her calm presence and consistent guidance were gradually earning their trust. Thomas, who had been the most resistant, began to approach her for advice on chores and schoolwork. Michael, who often acted out of frustration, started seeking her approval for small accomplishments. Even the youngest twins, Lucy and Peter, began to respond to her gentle touch and comforting words. Samuel, too, noticed the changes. He had been skeptical when Lena first arrived, unsure whether a young Apache woman could manage a household of 5 children and a working ranch. But now he could see the transformation firsthand. The children were more obedient, happier, and more confident. They laughed more, worked better together, and relied on Lena as a source of guidance and comfort. Samuel realized that Lena was not only helping the household run smoothly, but she was also teaching the children valuable life lessons, lessons in cooperation, responsibility, patience, and respect. He began to trust her judgment and included her in decisions about the ranch and household, seeking her advice on everything from planting schedules to caring for the animals. Lena also introduced small traditions that brought the family closer together. She taught the children simple Apache songs and stories, explaining the meaning behind each one and connecting them to the lessons she hoped they would learn about courage, patience, and respect. She encouraged the children to share their own stories, dreams, and fears, creating a sense of openness and trust in the household. Every evening, she would gather the children around the fire and tell them stories from her childhood, stories of survival, bravery, and kindness. These moments became cherished rituals, times when the children felt safe, connected, and valued. One afternoon, Lena decided to take the children on a short hike to a nearby stream. It was a beautiful day, with the sun shining brightly and a gentle breeze rustling the leaves of the trees. She explained the importance of observing nature carefully, pointing out plants, birds, and animal tracks. The children were fascinated, asking questions and trying to remember what she taught them. Even Thomas, who had been skeptical of outdoor activities, joined in eagerly, helping Michael and the twins navigate the rocky path. At the stream, Lena taught the children how to make a small shelter using sticks and leaves, turning the activity into a lesson about problem-solving, teamwork, and creativity. The children laughed, worked together, and discovered a sense of accomplishment that they had rarely felt before. These experiences helped the children understand that Lena was not there to replace their mother or to take over their lives, but to guide and support them. She respected their individuality while also encouraging them to work together and care for one another. Slowly, the household began to feel more like a real family, rather than just a group of people living under the same roof. Lena's influence was subtle but powerful. She did not demand love or respect, but she earned it through consistent actions, patience, and genuine care. The town began to notice as well. Neighbors who had once been skeptical of Lena's presence on the ranch began to admire her dedication and skill. They saw how she managed the household, cared for the children, and worked alongside Samuel on the ranch. Some even sought her advice on raising their own children or managing difficult situations. Lena, who had once felt isolated and uncertain in this new environment, was beginning to find a place not only within the family but also in the wider community. Her courage, kindness, and wisdom were slowly earning the respect of those around her. Of course, not every day was easy. There were still moments of frustration, arguments, and tears. The children were still learning how to trust, and Lena was still adapting to the demands of the ranch and household. But each challenge became an opportunity for growth, for the children, for Samuel, and for Lena herself. She learned to be patient with mistakes, to celebrate small victories, and to approach every situation with a calm and open heart. She also learned to rely on her instincts, drawing on the lessons she had learned from her parents and her culture to guide her decisions. One particularly difficult evening, a sudden thunderstorm struck the ranch. Rain poured down, the wind howled, and lightning lit up the dark sky. The youngest children were terrified, clinging to Lena and crying. Lena held them close, speaking softly and reassuringly, explaining that storms were natural and that they would be safe inside. She worked with Thomas and Michael to secure the animals, making sure the barn was protected and that the cattle were safe. For several hours, the family worked together, guided by Lena's calm presence and steady leadership. By the time the storm passed, the children were exhausted but proud of what they had accomplished. They had faced a challenge together and emerged stronger, with a newfound sense of trust in Lena and in each other. By the end of this period, Lena had become more than just a helper. She had become a central figure in the family. The children began to seek her out for guidance, comfort, and companionship. They laughed with her, shared their worries, and celebrated small achievements together. Samuel recognized that she had brought a new sense of balance, warmth, and stability to the household, a balance that had been missing for years. Lena herself felt a sense of fulfillment and purpose she had never experienced before. She had come to the ranch uncertain and fearful, but she was now an integral part of a family that had once seemed impossible to reach. Lena's journey was far from complete, but the foundations of trust, respect, and love had been laid. The children had begun to see her as a guide and protector, someone they could rely on even in difficult times. Samuel had learned to trust her judgment and appreciate her wisdom. And Lena herself had discovered a strength she did not know she possessed: the courage to face uncertainty, the patience to nurture trust, and the resilience to help a family grow stronger together. As spring turned to summer, the ranch was no longer just a place of work and survival. It had become a home, a place of laughter, learning, and connection. The bond between Lena and the children continued to grow, and the family began to experience a sense of harmony that had been missing for years. Lena knew that challenges would continue to come, but she also knew that together they could face anything. The turning point had arrived, and with it, the promise of a future filled with trust, love, and hope. Summer had arrived on the Cartwright Ranch, bringing with it long, hot days and dry, dusty winds. Lena had grown more confident in her role, and the children had begun to rely on her for guidance, comfort, and companionship. Samuel watched in quiet amazement as his household transformed under her care. The children laughed more often, worked together more effectively, and even looked to Lena when decisions needed to be made. It seemed as though life on the ranch was settling into a steady rhythm, until the unexpected happened. One afternoon, dark clouds began gathering on the horizon. The air, still heavy from the heat of the day, grew thick and tense. Birds fell silent, and even the cattle seemed uneasy, shifting nervously in the pens. Lena noticed the change immediately. She had grown familiar with the land and its moods, and she knew that storms in the desert could be sudden and severe. She called the children together. "We need to get ready," she said firmly, her voice calm but urgent. "The weather is changing, and we have to make sure everyone and everything is safe." The children exchanged nervous glances. Thomas, who had always taken on the role of protector, stepped forward. "What should we do first?" he asked. Lena smiled at him, proud of his willingness to take responsibility. "First, we check the animals," she instructed. "Then we secure the barn and make sure the youngest children are inside, safe and warm." Michael, who had sometimes been reckless, nodded seriously, finally seeing the importance of preparation. Sarah held the twins close as Lena guided them inside, explaining that the storm would pass but they must stay calm and follow the rules. Lena and the children rushed to the barn. Rain had begun to fall in heavy drops, quickly turning into a downpour. The wind howled, whipping dust and debris across the fields. Lena worked with Thomas and Michael to secure the gates, tie loose equipment, and make sure that every animal was safe. Her calm and steady presence reassured the boys, who had never experienced a storm so intense. Even the youngest children, though frightened, clung to Lena and trusted her guidance. The storm intensified as the afternoon wore on. Lightning cracked across the sky, followed by deep, rolling thunder that shook the house and barn. Water began to pool in the lower areas of the fields, and the wind threatened to tear loose boards from the fences. Lena moved quickly, directing the children to cover vulnerable areas and secure what they could. She reminded them to stay together, to speak clearly, and to help each other. In that moment, every lesson she had taught about patience, cooperation, and resilience came to life. At one point, a sudden gust of wind blew open the gate to the horse pen. The horses, startled by the noise and flashes of lightning, began to panic. Lena acted without hesitation, and she grabbed a rope, calm and focused, and tied the gates securely while Thomas and Michael helped calm the horses, speaking to them gently. Lena then guided the children back to the house, carrying Lucy and Peter in her arms, while Sarah helped with smaller tasks along the way. The scene was chaotic, but Lena's confidence and experience kept everyone moving safely. As night fell, the storm showed no sign of letting up. Lena and the children huddled together in the living room, listening to the rain pounding on the roof and the wind rattling the windows. She encouraged the children to stay calm, telling stories from her childhood that taught lessons of survival and courage. "Storms are part of life," she explained softly. "We cannot stop them, but we can face them together. We can protect each other and make it through." The children, reassured by her words and calm demeanor, began to relax. They held each other close, feeling the warmth of family even in the middle of a frightening night. Meanwhile, Samuel had returned from checking the distant fields. He had braved the storm to ensure that the crops and cattle farther from the house were safe. When he saw Lena with the children, calm and composed despite the raging storm outside, he felt a deep sense of gratitude and respect. She had not only kept the children safe, but had also managed the immediate dangers with skill and courage. For Samuel, it was a revelation. Lena was no longer just a helper or a teacher. She had become a true leader, capable of guiding the family through challenges that none of them could face alone. The storm lasted for hours, leaving behind flooded areas and broken fences. Lena and the children worked tirelessly alongside Samuel to repair the damage the following morning. They cleared debris, reinforced the barn, and helped the animals recover from the terrifying night. The work was exhausting, but it was also a bonding experience. The children saw firsthand how their cooperation, combined with Lena's guidance, could overcome even the most daunting obstacles. Thomas and Michael especially began to understand the meaning of responsibility, teamwork, and resilience. Word of the storm and Lena's efforts quickly spread throughout the town. Neighbors came to check on the Cartwright Ranch, expecting to find chaos and destruction. Instead, they found a family that had faced the storm together and emerged stronger. The children were safe, the animals unharmed, and the house had survived with only minor damage. People were amazed at Lena's courage, resourcefulness, and leadership. Many commented on how she had guided the children through fear and uncertainty, teaching them skills and lessons they would carry for the rest of their lives. For Lena, the storm was both a challenge and a triumph. She had proven to herself, the children, Samuel, and even the town, that she was capable of handling difficult situations with grace, intelligence, and courage. She had taken the lessons of her childhood, combined them with her own strength and determination, and applied them in a situation that demanded everything she had to give. And in doing so, she had cemented her place within the family, earning not just their trust but their admiration and love. The days following the storm are filled with activity. Repairs had to be made, fences rebuilt, and lessons reinforced. Lena continued to guide the children, showing them how to adapt to challenges, stay calm under pressure, and work together as a team. She also took moments to celebrate their successes, praising them for their bravery and resourcefulness during the storm. These small celebrations helped the children understand that facing challenges could lead to growth, pride, and a stronger sense of family. Samuel often observed Lena quietly, amazed by her abilities. He had spent years managing the ranch alone, raising 5 children with no partner, and he knew the challenges of that life all too well. Yet, Lena's presence had transformed the household. She brought not only practical skills but also emotional guidance, teaching the children how to cope with fear, disappointment, and frustration. She encouraged laughter, learning, and empathy, creating an environment where the children felt safe to express themselves and grow. The storm also strengthened Lena's connection with the town. People who had once doubted her intentions or ability now respected her deeply. They admired how she had managed the household, cared for the children, and led the family through a crisis with intelligence and compassion. Some neighbors even began seeking her advice, recognizing her as someone capable of handling challenges with grace. Lena's quiet courage and determination had left a lasting impression, not only on the family she cared for, but also on the wider community. By the end of the summer, it was clear that Lena had become an indispensable part of the Cartwright household. The children trusted her implicitly, turning to her for guidance, comfort, and companionship. Samuel relied on her judgment and skills, appreciating her contributions in ways he had never anticipated. And Lena herself had grown stronger, more confident, and more capable than she had ever imagined. She had faced a test of courage and resilience, and she had passed with flying colors. The storm had been a turning point in many ways. It had revealed the strength of Lena's character, the resilience of the children, and the deep bond that had formed between them. It had also shown the town that appearances could be deceiving, and that true courage and leadership often come from unexpected places. Lena's quiet determination and skill had transformed a frightening situation into an opportunity for growth, learning, and connection. As the summer sun returned to shine brightly over the ranch, Lena reflected on everything that had happened. She realized that life was full of unexpected challenges, but also full of opportunities to rise above them. She had come to the Cartwright Ranch uncertain and cautious, unsure of her place in the household and the world. But through patience, care, and courage, she had become an integral part of the family, trusted, respected, and deeply loved. The storm was over, but its lessons remained. Lena had shown the children and herself that fear could be met with calm, that challenges could be faced with determination, and that trust and love could grow even in the most difficult circumstances. And as she watched the family work together to restore the ranch, she knew that whatever trials lay ahead, they would face them together, stronger and more united than ever before. By the time fall arrived, the Cartwright Ranch had transformed from a house of quiet tension into a home full of life, laughter, and connection. The storm that had tested Lena and the children had become a story they often recalled, not with fear, but with pride. It was a turning point that had proven their strength and the bond that had formed between them. Lena had moved from being an uncertain newcomer to the heart of the household, trusted, respected, and loved by everyone in the family. The children had grown in ways Lena could see every day. Eyes so stubborn and skeptical had become thoughtful, responsible, and protective, not just of his siblings, but also of the household as a whole. He often helped Lena plan chores, taught the younger children tasks, and took pride in contributing to the ranch. Michael, who had once been reckless and impatient, had learned the value of careful planning and teamwork. He listened to Lena's guidance and took pride in completing tasks successfully. Sarah had gained confidence and a sense of independence, while the twins, Lucy and Peter, had grown more secure and playful, often seeking Lena's comfort but also exploring the world with curiosity and joy. Lena's influence extended beyond daily routines. She had created a household in which mistakes were met with guidance rather than anger. Challenges were seen as opportunities, and success was celebrated no matter how small. She encouraged the children to pursue their interests, whether it was drawing, reading, or learning about the land. She taught them to care for animals with patience and respect, to tend to the garden with diligence, and to observe nature with curiosity and understanding. Each lesson was more than practical. It carried the values of empathy, responsibility, and resilience. Samuel, observing the transformation, could hardly believe the changes in his household. He had spent years raising his children alone, managing the ranch as best he could, but the warmth and harmony that now filled the home were unprecedented. Lena had not only helped the children grow, but she had also restored balance and joy to the entire household. Samuel often reflected quietly on how fortunate they were to have her. He had come to rely on her wisdom, her judgment, and her calm strength in ways he had never anticipated. The town had taken notice as well. Stories of Lena's courage during the storm, her patience in teaching the children, and her dedication to the family had spread far and wide. Neighbors who had once doubted her abilities now spoke of her with respect. People admired the way she managed the household, handled emergencies, and guided the children through challenges with intelligence and compassion. Lena, however, remained humble. She never sought praise, instead focusing on her responsibilities and the well-being of the family she had come to love. One day, a neighbor named Mrs. Reynolds stopped by the ranch, carrying a basket of fresh bread. She had come to see the children and meet Lena properly. As they sat on the porch, Mrs. Reynolds spoke warmly. "I have never seen such a change in a family," she said. "You have brought life, love, and order to this household. Everyone in town is talking about you." Lena smiled, placing the twins on her lap and patting their heads gently. "I am just doing my best," she replied softly. "The children have taught me as much as I have taught them. We have all grown together." Mrs. Reynolds nodded, impressed by Lena's humility and insight. Lena also took care to strengthen Samuel's bond with the children. She encouraged family meals where everyone shared stories of their day, taught lessons about responsibility, and celebrated achievements. She organized small projects on the ranch where Samuel and the children could work together, such as repairing fences, planting gardens, or caring for the animals. Through these activities, the children learned not only practical skills, but also the importance of trust, communication, and cooperation. Samuel noticed that he had become closer to each child, not just as their father, but as a partner in their growth and learning. Education became another area where Lena contributed greatly. She encouraged the children to read and write, teaching them the importance of knowledge alongside practical skills. She spent afternoons helping Thomas with math problems, guiding Sarah in her writing, and showing Michael how to solve small technical challenges on the ranch. Even the twins, while too young for formal lessons, were taught basic counting, colors, and the names of plants and animals. Education was no longer a chore, but an adventure, guided by Lena's patience and creativity. The household's success also encouraged Lena to reach beyond the ranch. She began sharing her knowledge and skills with other families in the community, especially those who faced challenges similar to what she had encountered. She taught neighbors how to care for animals, manage crops, and handle emergencies. She shared stories of courage and problem solving, inspiring other families to approach challenges with patience, resourcefulness, and empathy. Lena's reputation as a compassionate and skilled young woman grew, and her influence extended beyond the walls of the ranch. Despite all the progress, Lena remained attentive to each child's emotional needs. She understood that childhood could be filled with fears, doubts, and insecurities. She listened patiently whenever a child had worries, offered comfort and encouragement, and reminded them that mistakes were a natural part of learning. She celebrated their successes, no matter how small, and helped them see challenges as opportunities for growth. Through her consistent care, the children developed confidence, resilience, and a sense of security that had once seemed impossible in their lives. One particularly memorable moment came during a local harvest festival. The children, dressed in simple but clean and cheerful clothes, accompanied Lena and Samuel into town. They carried baskets of fresh produce from the ranch, showing off the work they had done together. Townspeople were amazed at how happy, confident, and capable the children appeared. They laughed, played games, and shared stories with other children, demonstrating a sense of joy and unity that Lena had helped cultivate. Even Thomas, once reserved and serious, laughed freely and helped his younger siblings navigate the festival activities. Lena watched with pride, seeing the results of months of patience, guidance, and love. By winter, the ranch had become a warm, thriving home. The household worked efficiently, faced challenges together, and celebrated the small victories of daily life. Lena had become not just a caretaker, but a true member of the family, someone whose presence was vital to the children's growth and happiness. Samuel often expressed his gratitude, though Lena never sought recognition. Her reward was in the smiles of the children, the harmony in the household, and the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. Lena's journey had been one of courage, patience, and transformation. She had arrived at the ranch uncertain, nervous, and unsure of her place. Over time, she had built trust with the children, guided them through challenges, and become a source of strength and stability. She had proven to Samuel, the children, and even the town that her determination, care, and resilience could overcome obstacles and create a family built on love, respect, and cooperation. Looking back, Lena reflected on how far they had all come. She remembered the first days of tension and uncertainty, the arguments and doubts, and the fear that had once filled the household. She remembered the storm that had tested their courage and resilience, and the moments when it had seemed impossible to keep everyone safe. And yet, through patience, teamwork, and determination, they had overcome every challenge. The household had become not just a family, but a community, a place of learning, growth, and love. The town, too, recognized the transformation. People marveled at the family's success, the children's growth, and Lena's leadership. Many sought her advice, hoping to emulate the harmony and balance she had brought to the Cartwright household. Lena, however, remained humble, emphasizing that the change had been a team effort, achieved through cooperation, patience, and shared determination. She reminded everyone that true family is built through trust, respect, and love, not simply by circumstance. As spring returned once again to the ranch, life continued with its familiar rhythm. The children thrived, the animals flourished, and the land was well tended. Lena had become a central figure in the household, guiding, teaching, and nurturing with quiet strength. Samuel had grown more confident in the support she provided, relying on her not only for practical guidance but also for emotional support and partnership in raising the children. The ranch, once a place of uncertainty and struggle, had become a home filled with laughter, learning, and hope. For Lena, the journey had been transformative. She had arrived at the ranch with fear and uncertainty, unsure of her role and her place in this new family. She had faced challenges, learned patience, and developed resilience. She had guided the children through fear, doubt, and insecurity, earning their trust and admiration. And in the process, she had discovered her own strength, courage, and capacity for love. In the end, the story of Lena Whitefeather and the Cartwright family became more than a tale of survival and adaptation. It was a story of trust, courage, and the power of love to transform lives. The children had grown into confident, capable, and compassionate individuals. Samuel had found renewed hope and support in raising his children. And Lena, once a young woman uncertain of her future, had become the heart of a family, a source of inspiration to the town and a living example of what patience, determination, and love could achieve. The ranch continued to thrive, and the family faced each new day with confidence and unity. Lena's journey had not only shaped the lives of the children, but had also created a lasting legacy of hope, trust, and love. The town, once doubtful and skeptical, could not help but admire the strength and courage of the young Apache woman who had transformed a struggling household into a thriving family. Lena had shown that with patience, determination, and kindness, even the most difficult circumstances could be overcome, and that the bonds of family, whether born by blood or built by love, could create a home filled with joy, trust, and resilience.